Hey, everybody, welcome back to The Smattering. I'm Jason Hall, and we are going to be talking about Adobe today. Adobe has recently announced a huge acquisition. I'm joined by Jeff Santoro. Jeff, how are you, buddy?
I'm good, man. How you doing?
I'm good. Before we get into it, though, just a little bit of housekeeping. Just want to remind anybody watching this, if you like what we're doing, if you like our videos, please click on that subscribe button right there and subscribe to our channel. Also, check out the show notes below. We have a podcast. We'd love for you to check out our podcast however you get your podcast. So be sure to check that out. One last thing. We have a great partnership with The Motley Fool. Just want to give a shout out to The Fool for sponsoring this video. If you're interested in getting The Motley Fool's 10 best stocks to buy right now, you'll see the link on your screen. Click on that link. It's fool.com/The Smattering and get those 10 stocks to buy right now. All right, Jeff, on to you. What's going on here?
So Adobe reported earnings this past week, and that got completely overshadowed by this acquisition that was announced of a company called Figma. So the acquisition is for $20 billion, which if you look at Figma's last private round of investments that they received, that values them about twice that last private round. And it works out to be about 50
That's about
times.
a year ago, right? So it's not like we're talking a long time ago.
Right, about a year ago. And it works out to be 50 times sales when you look at their revenue. So this is by any metric, an expensive acquisition without a doubt. So then the question becomes, why did Adobe do this? So I think it's important to understand that while Adobe has a pretty good advantage in the market with its core creative suite like Photoshop and Illustrator, it's the industry standard. There are some.
I mean, these are the products that, for starting at the youngest ages, all the way up through high school, all the way through college, art schools. These are the tools that creatives use, photography, whatever it may be.
Right. But they've been legacy. The legacy program was, buy the disc every couple of years. Then they switched to subscription model. They were one of the first companies to do that. SaaS wasn't a thing when they decided to make this switch. But there were some shortcomings, which were it's not web-based, so you can't do it in the cloud. You can't do it in your browser, or at least it hasn't been traditionally. They're starting to head in that direction. And there was some shortcomings with collaboration. So enter Figma, which was making headway with, light users of these creative products. And I think Adobe realized that they were probably going to start to lose some market share to a company like Figma, because it would be harder for Adobe to catch up to what Figma offered than it would be for Figma to add the things that Adobe does well. And I think that's what drove this acquisition. So my question for you, Jason, is, was it a good acquisition or was it a huge mistake?
I think the jury's going to be out on that for a while, as it often is for these massive acquisitions. So you think about, besides Adobe XD, Figma doesn't really compete with Adobe's creative products. And Figma will even says that on their website, right? Even though they're not directly competing, the reality is that because of the need to have these tools that are more collaborative, people are willing to make sacrifices, right? I think we've learned that when it comes to convenience, when it comes to ease of use, quality isn't always the most important thing. The most feature sets aren't necessarily the most important thing. And that means that Figma, even though not a direct competitor, certainly represents an enormous risk to Adobe, maybe not upending the business, but certainly commoditizing the value of its creative products.
Yeah, I agree. And so I think you're right. We're not going to know how this ends up for quite a while now. It could be a great acquisition. It could end up being a mistake. One thing that it tells me is that maybe Adobe's moat wasn't quite what we all thought it was. And I also can't help but wonder, why didn't they do this 2 or 3 years ago? So it does to some degree make me question management, at least a little bit, to not see this coming. So my last question for you is, does this change your opinion about owning Adobe at all? Or are you at a wait and see point with this?
I want to share a valuation metric here too. This is a look at price to earnings is purple, and this is price to operating cash flow. If you look at both of those metrics, going back to 2016, kind of when it hit a critical mass of that transition from discs to recurring revenue, this certainly looks like it is priced cheaply, right? But I can't help but wonder if that just isn't maybe just a reasonable valuation, because this is a business that its growth rate has already started to slow. In addition to announcing this big acquisition, they did say that their guidance going forward is going to be a little lighter than they were expecting.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a shareholder and I'm in hold mode right now. I want to think a little bit more about this. If I want to be charitable to the acquisition, though, one thing that I do wonder and kind of hope as a shareholder is that this actually unlocks or opens up a whole new market and maybe does eventually get them to that moat that maybe we thought they already had. Because if they can now, sometimes it's easier to buy the thing than to build the thing. And granted, they paid a lot of money for this, but if they really can now all of a sudden find a way to let people collaborate, do things on the web, but then still offer the industry standard tools that are available in things like Illustrator and Photoshop, there's not an unreasonable path to this turning out to being a very good acquisition that helps them, for the next 10, 20, 30 years of their business.